Apparently, the Phoenix Suns decided to put on a show for the TNT cameras. No LeBron James, no Chris Paul, no Cam Johnson, no Jay Crowder, and yet one of the most dramatic Suns games of the season, a 115-105 win. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll talk about the ejection, the pull away at the end, and more from this win over LA. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you all for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Wednesday. One more day of the work week for many of you, so happy Wednesday. Welcome to Wednesday, and welcome to a winning Wednesday. The Suns keep having these Tuesday night games because they are national TV gold these days. Team players, fans, tend to like to watch this team. So thank you for tuning in here to celebrate the win. You can find us on all podcast platforms, and we are free everywhere. The best way to keep us that way is to listen and follow along. So hit subscribe wherever you're finding the show, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, hit the bell down below, get a notification when a new show goes up, and drop a comment down below with your take on tonight's game. Why did the Suns win? What's on your mind? We have a lot to get into. As always, we're going to start with the moment of the game. All right. And you probably know where I'm going with this one. It's not exactly a difficult game to track down the key turning point. In this case, it was Patrick Beverley's ejection, which came at the 3-minute and 55-second mark of the fourth quarter. We can get into the back and forth a little bit. Obviously, we know a few things to set the stage. One, the Lakers are having a bad season, okay? There's no ignoring that. Two, I think it's a fair thing to say that Devin Booker likes to pick on his matchup a little bit, all right? And so Book did not even have his best night overall, but he clearly saw Austin Reeves as, look, he's the kind of dorky-looking white guy on the team. Booker clearly had some words for him tonight. And the last thing we know is Patrick Beverley seems to hate the Suns, seems to have no limits to what it is that he will do to up the ante of the physicality and the cheapness of whatever is happening in a game. He will take the baseline that has been set by the officials, by the rest of the players, by the overall tone and vibe of the game, and he will multiply that by 15 and come at you, especially if you aren't looking. That's his specialty, and we know that, right? So those were the lingering, simmering sort of tensions going on. Then we get to that 3-minute, 55-second mark. What happens is Ayton makes a dunk. The Lakers come back down the other end. Austin Reeves goes in along the left side for a layup. Booker goes to contest it, swats his hand down, clearly makes contact with Reeves on his head, but to me, that's not a play that if the following set of events had not happened, I don't think the Booker foul would have been called a flagrant. That's just my opinion. But after the contest, Ayton comes down. He's kind of jarring back and forth a little bit with Davis. They're both standing near Reeves. Ayton is standing on top of Reeves, basically. And that's all that Beverley needed. And so he charges from about the opposing free throw line or free throw line extended area toward Ayton, pushes him over his own teammate, over Reeves. Ayton sells it like a champion, like a WWE superstar, flails, splays his legs, throws, like almost does a complete backflip to sell the contact. And then the bench is clear and all the nonsense happens. Nothing really beyond that. Although after Beverley sends Ayton to the ground, what he does next to me actually is relevant here. Not so much like in deciding if he should get ejected or anything else, but he kind of stands his ground over the top of Reeves like he's some sort of bouncer at the Austin Reeves nightclub or like Lakers Land, the nightclub. I don't know. Like he starts to turn the whole game into some sort of little skirmish, and it's just embarrassing behavior to me. All right, because the last point in terms of setting the stage for all of this that I want to make is that dunk that Ayton made, the last Suns offensive possession before all these fouls get called. That dunk puts it into 10-point game territory. It's a double-digit lead for the Suns at that point. It goes from 8 to 10. And there's 4 minutes left. By no means is the game over, but it's trending in that direction, right? The Suns are making a run. They finally have all their starters on the floor, or they're about to. Campaign would come in about a minute later. And look, like, it's one thing to get into a situation like that if you're Patrick Beverley to get physical, to be a little violent, to, set the tone or whatever. Depending on if you're a Suns fan or a Lakers fan, you might have some different thoughts about what to call that. Point being, I would understand it if it was a situation of neck and neck basketball, a game that's going to matter for the standings, all of this. And I promise you, this is not me just like rubbing in the Lakers' state of affairs, but I think it's relevant, right? This was a game that was starting to get away from the Lakers. This is a game that it's their last game without LeBron James. He's reportedly coming back Friday, according to Chris Haynes on the broadcast of this game. And it's not a matchup that matters to the Lakers right now. They just need to win games. And so to take it to the level that he did with all of that in mind and effectively end his team's chances at winning. Like, Beverley getting ejected, is that going to be the difference between a win and a loss? In my opinion, no. But you put the wind in the Suns' sails, and you took so much of the energy out of the game that the team with the 10-point lead becomes the immediate most likely thing to happen is just them winning the game. So he jeopardized it. He did it in a situation that didn't make sense. And he just turned the game into like a bunch of dudes trying to beat each other up at the park. Like, he has this way with when he does this stuff and the degree that he brings it to where I don't know. I might be overreacting. It's one of those things. I just got done watching the game, but I don't understand how the NBA can just continue to give him these slaps on the wrist every few months in perpetuity. Like, whether you look at the Clippers game when we last saw him get ejected against the Suns, where it's game 6, the Suns are clearly about to go to the finals, the Clippers are done, and Beverley just decides to take matters into his own hands and just frankly embarrass himself and embarrass his team on a huge stage in a closeout playoff game in front of their home fans. Or it's the fine that he got, I believe, toward the end of the season or in the playoffs with Minnesota last year, and now this, which I would imagine is going to be either a suspension or a fine. I just don't know how the NBA can keep putting up with this. And so, yes, it ended up benefiting the Suns in this case. Ayton wasn't hurt, obviously. Nobody from the Suns is in jeopardy of a suspension or anything like that. The Suns obviously won the game. But bigger picture, something about the Suns seems to bring it out of this guy, and I just think the NBA should do more. I don't know what that is. Something like a track record being taken into consideration for a suspension. Is he hurting or injuring anybody? I mean, he did that to Russell Westbrook, right, once upon a time, but no, I mean, he's not doing that. But he turns these games into just frankly, ridiculous clown shows for the league over and over and over. And at a certain point, you got to do something more. But that's not the Suns' problem to worry about. I want to talk to you about my biggest takeaway of the game, which might surprise you. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by Turo, the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, UK, Canada, and, coming soon, Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event. Find affordable economy vehicles if you're on a budget. Or test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it might fit your everyday lifestyle. Many Turo hosts can deliver the car right to you as well, so whatever vehicle you want, they can get it to your doorstep to make the process that much easier. Every trip at Turo is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply, so forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. All right, main takeaway from today's game is, look, it's beating the same drum that I've beaten for a while on two counts, okay? So one is Deandre Ayton, and maybe it's two separate takeaways. I actually don't know how similar these things are. But watching this game, I was struck by the way that the matchups played out. Okay, so follow me a little bit. And some of this is because of Jay Crowder being out. If we think back to the 2021 playoffs, matchup-wise, obviously LeBron was healthy, so that changed some things. But the other big difference was the Lakers were playing Marc Gasol and Montrezl Harrell at the 5. And so you saw a situation that actually played to the Suns' strengths, in my opinion, where Bridges was able to guard LeBron, Crowder was able to guard Davis, and Ayton was able to be in help, right? He was able to be a help defender at the rim. He was able to be somebody who, if the big man was setting a screen, Ayton could switch and you would be okay with that. He was able to crash the boards and then especially run out in transition. Okay, these were all different things that the Suns were able to leverage Ayton's versatility because he wasn't having to guard a primary scoring option on LA. And that's what I mean by it worked to their advantage. And so you fast forward to tonight's game, and the matchups are different, right? Because the Lakers are finally not playing a center. They have Thomas Bryant. He's really just a backup right now. They have Damian Jones. Maybe he will start, but he's injured currently. And so Davis has been their center for most of the season as he's been healthy. I think that actually hurts the Suns. You would think maybe you're probably watching this game and feeling like, okay, well, Ayton being on the best opposing scorer, that's a good thing, right? He's the Suns' second best defender, I think most would agree. And so he gets to guard the best option on the other team. Win-win. But a few things I disagree with on that. One, we saw him get into foul trouble again in the first half, 3 fouls in the first half. And two, I just think it negates some of the other things that you would like for him to be able to do, right? There were a lot of possessions, especially early and especially in transition, where Davis was able to get some hit-ahead passes, get some guys, into space with his playmaking, and then those players were able to drive to the basket because Davis is out on the perimeter, right? And so Ayton's not there to do that. That's obviously what the playmaking 5, that's the value of it. That's the beauty of having these players. And so I don't think this matters so much for the Lakers, really. I don't think they're going to be a team the Suns need to worry about, although they have been playing a little better lately, but they're still winless on the road and they're only 5-11. Like this is not a team that should scare anybody right now, but it does hold lessons for the future, and that's why it's a takeaway from tonight, right? You look at the Nuggets, okay? The Nuggets with more of a legitimate roster around Jokic than they've had, okay? I know you're listening to this show right after they just lost to the Detroit Pistons, so I get you. You're probably laughing a little bit tonight, but that's a legit thing, right? You look at Karl Anthony Towns. The Minnesota Timberwolves right now are a mess, but that's a team with a similar blueprint. Okay, even Domantas Sabonis. I'm looking at the standings and I'm seeing the Kings, right? These teams where, and then obviously you get to the East, Giannis, etc. These teams where a center or a guy who can sometimes play center is the playmaker. It neutralizes a lot of things about the Suns' defense that I think are interesting. The Ayton part being one of them. But if you don't have the ball predominantly in a point guard's hands or a perimeter playmaker's hands, then suddenly what Mikal Bridges does for you is a little less valuable because he's not at the point of attack. So just put this one away, right? We haven't really seen the Suns have to play a team like that at its best form because Davis got hurt in that playoff series. Giannis didn't actually end up playing that much center. Jokic was a guy that they were able to pick apart when he was trying to defend rather than vice versa, and he did not have his teammates around him. So it's just something interesting. It's a way that obviously in the NBA, it's a big chess piece for every team against all of their opponents, but the Suns especially have a little bit of weakness there. The second takeaway from today is just, look, there's just not a lot of teams that have the depth and cohesion that the Suns have. All right, it's not anything you don't already know about the Suns, but this game was tough. Anthony Davis played an incredible night of basketball. We'll talk about him a little bit in the next segment. We'll talk a little bit about the rotation in the next segment, but this wasn't an easy one, all right? I thought Russ played fairly well up until the last few minutes of the game. I thought Lonnie Walker did his thing, getting to the basket. When you say slasher, Lonnie Walker should be what we all think of. He should be in the basketball dictionary entry for slasher at this point. He is the modern epitome of that. And then Davis. So, that all being true, this was easily a game, in my opinion, that the Suns could have lost, right? The Suns could have overlooked it. They could have, the first quarter was a lot closer than it should have been. Early on, nobody could buy a bucket. And, I could easily have seen this game going the same way as, let's put out there, for example, the Orlando Magic game, right? Or even the Jazz, okay? Great individual performances and a, hard competing physical team like the Lakers could have caught the Suns off guard, especially considering Devin Booker wasn't his best. Campaign was not good at all tonight. This was a losable game, but you have guys like Dwayne Washington doing just enough on offense, like Damian Lee doing the things he's been doing all year, Ish Wainwright guarding Russell Westbrook in a couple of key moments, making both of his threes, Torrey Craig making a key three to close out the game, making some difference-making, some game-changing defensive plays. So the depth, the cohesion, it's going to be the story of the season for as long as Cam Johnson remains out, as long as Chris Paul remains out, as long as Jay Crowder is still at home in Atlanta and not in a Suns uniform and not having been traded yet. So it's not glamorous, it's not sexy, it's repetitive, but it's how the Suns are winning games right now. All right, I want to get to the bench mob vibe check as well as the box score oddity of the game, our recap segments, our go-tos. First, today's show, guys, also brought to you by BetOnline. Look, BetOnline has you covered more than anybody else for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis all year long. Get the latest odds and trends for every pro and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to esports, and of course, right now, soccer. They've got it all at betonline.net. Looking at odds for the Black Friday face-off between Team USA and England in the World Cup. I'm not advocating to bet on the US, okay? I'm not doing that. But there's a couple of other interesting bets. Firstly, over 2.5 total goals scored. I do think with the way England can put the ball in the net, the desperation that the US are going to have, I feel like this is going to be a game with 3+ goals. That feels reasonable to me. And then lastly, draw on the game. That's like the boring bet to make, but in a lot of these World Cup games, it's a safe one. That's the best result the U.S. could hope for. So everything's a little more fun with some money down on it. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to get that fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. You've heard my moment of the game. You've heard my takeaway of the game. Now let's get to some rapid fire recap segments, beginning with, as almost always, the Bench Mob Vibe Check, where we talk about the bench, the rotation, some of the secondary pieces and what is going on with them. What I want to start with is Cameron Payne. So Cam Payne was puzzlingly, the team outscored the Lakers by 12 when Cam Payne was on the floor in his 28 minutes. Plus minus lied today. All right. Unfortunately, this was just not the game for Cam. 5 fouls, 5 turnovers, and 5 of 15 from field goal range. Maybe it was what's the word with this when the snowflake is the same on both sides? I can't think of that word. The consistency of the number 5 across the box score. Maybe it was just some bad juju for him today. Either way, he missed a bunch of point blank looks. I'm trying to pull up his in the paint scoring today. All right, so he took 9 shots in the paint, maybe 10. There's a few that were just on the edge, but of those 10 shots, he only made 3. He was 2 of 4 in the restricted area, 3 of 7 in the shots that were directly in the paint, and then 1 of 3 from deep. So, point being here, with Payne, he's going to have nights like this. I would have been okay with a lot of the other components of it. Missing layups, weird stuff. Players have nights like that. I'm not going to kill him for it. I didn't kill him the other night when he, against the Heat, when he was 4 of 17 last week. So I wouldn't have killed him for a similar night tonight, especially considering the Suns still won the game. But what I will kill him for is the 5 fouls and the 5 turnovers, right? We're talking about his Chris Paul impression. That was the whole subject of my show the other day after the Knicks game, was Payne coming in the fourth quarter, limiting his mistakes, closing out the game with great passing, great feel, great shot making, and winning for the Suns, closing out a win. He did not play like that today, and that's the part that he has to do. The shot making can come and go. The Suns don't always need that from him, as we saw tonight. They do need smart decisions, the right play, and balanced basketball on both ends. They didn't get that from him tonight. Flipping over to the guy who played a lot of Cam Payne's fourth quarter minutes for him was Dwayne Washington. Now, Washington was pretty effective in the pick and roll. That's usual for him. He did miss some strange, catch and shoot threes that were pretty open. Again, that happens for young players, especially like Washington. He didn't have too many turnovers. He didn't have a lot, but what I will say is I tweeted during the game, time to take Washington out, and he made a couple plays after that. So I guess I was wrong, but the little things that he doesn't always do, right? Getting behind the play defensively, not always rotating crisply. He's, taking a shot out like a 1 or 0 pass possession in a key moment. Transition, he's not matching up to the right players. There's all these little things that you really just see his inexperience crop up, and Monty felt like he could live with that tonight. That bet paid off. He was right. He did live with it, and he won. The team won, but this should not be looked at as some sort of Dwayne Washington overtaking Payne in the rotation, right? I don't know if anyone's thinking that, but please don't get tricked there. That's not what this was, but it's still a sign of confidence in Washington that it was able to work, and that Monty even did it in the first place. Lastly, on the Bench Mob Vibe Check here, Bismack Biyombo, second straight game where he played over Jock Landale. Now, Biyombo was not amazing. He wasn't much of a factor on offense, in my opinion. The screens and everything else. Part of it was the lineups he was in, the bench lineups right now, without Landale being in there. And with guys like Payne or even Torrey Craig now being in the starting lineup, as much as the bench has worked at times, there's just not a lot of space on the floor. You know, Booker plus the bench, we saw a Booker, Lee, Okogie, Wainwright, Biyombo lineup, I believe, at one point. There's just not a lot of space, so Biyombo is not going to have the opportunities to get wide open layups and dunks on the roll. But I thought he was pretty impactful as a rim protector. He had some good moments against Anthony Davis. He kept his fouls to 0 in 16 minutes, which is a nice thing to see. And then 2 blocks. So did his job. I think I was surprised to not see Monty go to Landale and just try all 3 centers tonight, personally, especially in the first half with Ayton in foul trouble. I just thought we would see Landale to get some scoring in there. The Lakers scored 33 points in the second quarter. It would have been helpful to get Landale out there to keep pace, but I also understand keeping with one rotation and not fudging it around too much game to game. And so Landale, Biyombo played over Landale on Sunday against the Knicks, and now again tonight against the Lakers. We'll see what happens going forward. Lastly, the box score oddity of the night. Nothing on the Suns side, although I do think the 3 steals and 2 blocks for for Craig, wow, Freudian slip, I suppose there, was pretty nice. But he was one-upped in those 2 categories and overall very clearly by Anthony Davis. Now, I know Suns fans aren't going to like him. I personally don't have an issue with Anthony Davis. The Pelicans were one of the first teams I ever had a chance to blog about back when I was in college and just trying to get a sports writing gig of any shape. I got to cover the Pelicans for a couple of years. That was pretty cool, so I have a soft spot. I also don't think Davis ever has really done anything to the Suns all that bad. I mean, he was injured most of that playoff series, and he's missed a lot of these other games. I don't think he's that, insulting of a player. If you're a Lakers fan and he's not available or consistent, I would get that. Other guys, other fans around the NBA coming up with ways to hate AD has always been kind of funny to me. I hope Suns fans aren't too pushy or aggressive about it, but either way, the man was amazing tonight, all right? 37 points on 11 of 17 shooting from the field, 15 of 16 from the free throw line. Didn't even bother going behind the arc for any 3-point attempts, 21 rebounds, 5 steals, 5 blocks. It's about as good of a one-man show game as you're going to get in the NBA. I thought at one point, are we about to see the first 30-30 game since Kevin Love a decade ago? It feels like Davis, during this stretch, although LeBron is coming back, this would have been about as good of an opportunity to see one as any player in the league. His passing early on was actually pretty good, and I looked up and he only had 2 assists, but he was just... The assist was the only category away from him being also getting a 5x5 game in this one. So, look, he was aggressive. He was consistent. He was poised. He was comfortable. He's playing at the top of his game right now. And so I do think this loss or this win against the Lakers, people might look at it and think okay, it probably shouldn't have been that close. The Suns should have just walked away with that one. This team played well. They're better than their record shows right now. If they had been playing at this level all year, I don't think they'd be 5-11. I think they would be closer to 500. And so it's nothing to, overlook. The Suns played a good game. They beat a very, very strong individual performance by Anthony Davis with some strong support from role players. And they pulled it out despite some wonkiness, some ejections, and all the rest. That'll do it for today's show, guys. A big thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Wednesday to celebrate a 115-105 Suns win. I will be back tomorrow with the show. We will see about Friday. I have not made a determination on if I'm going to pull out the microphone on Thanksgiving, but we will be back tomorrow. In the meantime, go make Locked On Sports today your second listen here on this Wednesday to catch up on everything else going on across the whole world of sports in 20 minutes or less. That show available wherever you get podcasts. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.